My name is Madison Pierce, and I thought I knew my brother better than anyone. Growing up in Chicago, we were inseparable despite our 7-year age gap. But when James built his tech empire and became worth $50 million, everything changed. He transformed into someone I didn't recognize, arrogant, dismissive, and cruel. He flaunted his wealth at every family gathering, making snide comments about my simple life as a social worker. What James didn't know was that our late grandmother had left me something far more valuable than money: the truth about our family's past and his real father's identity. When I finally decided to open that sealed envelope she'd hidden for 20 years, I discovered secrets that would bring his empire crashing down and expose the lies our family had been built on. Sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't money or power, it's the truth. My name is Madison Pierce, and the moment I held that sealed envelope in my trembling hands, I knew my brother's $50 million empire was about to crumble like a house of cards. The October wind whipped through Chicago's Lincoln Park as I stood outside James's penthouse building, watching him through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 40th floor apartment. Even from the street, I could see him gesturing dramatically, probably bragging to his latest group of sycophants about his newest acquisition or business deal. The sight made my stomach churn with a mixture of anger and something I hadn't felt in years: pity. It hadn't always been this way between us. Growing up on the South Side in our modest 2-bedroom house, James had been my protector, my hero. 7 years older, he'd walked me to school every day, helped me with homework, and promised me the world when he made it big. "Someday, Maddie," he'd say, using the nickname only he was allowed to call me, "we're going to live in a place where Mom never has to work double shifts again." Our mother, Sarah, had raised us alone after our father supposedly died in a construction accident when I was 3. She worked as a nurse, pulling 12-hour shifts at Chicago General, coming home exhausted but always finding time to read us bedtime stories or help with school projects. James had been determined to change our circumstances, and I'd believed in him completely. That belief carried me through high school while he was at Northwestern studying computer science, through college while he was building his first startup, and even through the early years when his company, Pierce Technologies, started gaining traction. I'd been so proud watching him succeed, even as I chose a different path: social work, helping families in crisis, making a difference one person at a time rather than chasing millions. But success changed James. The first crack appeared 3 years ago when he bought the penthouse. Instead of inviting me to see it, he'd made a point of mentioning how much it cost at Mom's birthday dinner. $2.8 million, he'd said casually, cutting into his steak. The monthly maintenance alone is more than most people make in a year. He'd looked directly at me when he said it, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The transformation accelerated after that. Family dinners became James's personal stage where he'd regale us with stories of business deals, expensive vacations, and the celebrities he'd met at charity galas, the same charity galas he'd started attending not out of genuine concern, but because they were networking opportunities with Chicago's elite. 2 months ago, at Mom's 65th birthday party, he'd hit a new low. I'd saved for months to buy her a beautiful necklace from a local artisan, nothing extravagant, but meaningful. James had shown up with a brand new car, keys dangling from his fingers like a prize. "I know it's not much," he'd said with false modesty. "Just a little BMW. Figured you needed something reliable for retirement, Mom." The worst part wasn't even the car. It was what happened next. When Mom opened my gift, James had actually laughed. "That's cute, Madison," he'd said, examining the handcrafted silver pendant. "How much did this cost? $50? When I'd stayed silent, he'd patted my shoulder condescendingly. "It's the thought that counts, right? We can't all afford the finer things." That night, I'd gone home to my small apartment in Wicker Park and cried for the first time in years. Not because of the humiliation, I'd grown thick skin working with troubled families, but because I'd lost my brother. The man who'd once promised to take care of our family had become someone who used his wealth as a weapon against the people who loved him most. But everything changed last week when Mom called me, her voice shaky with emotion. "Madison, honey, I need you to come over. There's something I have to give you, something Grandma Rose left specifically for you before she passed." Our grandmother had died 2 years ago, and we'd thought all her affairs were settled. But apparently she'd left final instructions with her lawyer to deliver a sealed envelope to me on my 30th birthday, which had been last month. The lawyer had been trying to reach me, but I'd moved apartments and changed phone numbers after a particularly difficult case at work. She was very specific. the elderly lawyer had explained when I met him at his downtown office. This envelope is not to be opened until you turn 30 and only by you. She said you'd know when the right time came to use what's inside. Now, standing outside James's building with that envelope burning a hole in my purse, I thought I understood what Grandma Rose had meant. The right time was when the brother I'd once idolized had become someone I barely recognized. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Family dinner tomorrow night, 8 p.m. sharp. We're trying that new place on Magnificent Mile. Hope you can afford to keep up with the dress code. Even his texts had become cruel. The emoji, the casual mention of expense, the implication that I might not be able to afford dinner at an upscale restaurant. It was designed to make me feel small, inadequate, less than. I stared up at his penthouse again, watching him pour what was probably a glass of wine that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The envelope felt heavier somehow as I walked back to my car, parked 3 blocks away because I couldn't afford the garage fees in his neighborhood. Inside my modest Honda Civic, I sat for a moment in the gathering darkness, holding the sealed packet that Grandma Rose had entrusted to me. She'd always been the wisest person in our family, the one who saw through pretenses and called people on their nonsense. If she'd left me something with specific instructions about timing, there had to be a reason. "What did you see, Grandma?" I wondered, running my fingers over the envelope's edges. What did you know that the rest of us didn't? Tomorrow night's dinner was going to be different than James expected. After months of his condescending comments and casual cruelty, after watching him use his success to diminish everyone around him, I was finally ready to learn what secrets our grandmother had been keeping. And you know what? Part of me was terrified to find out what was inside that envelope, but an even bigger part of me was ready for my brother to finally face some consequences for the person he'd become. Have you ever had a family member whose success changed them into someone you didn't recognize? Someone who used their achievements to make you feel small? Tell me about it in the comments below. I have a feeling I'm not the only one who's experienced this kind of painful transformation. If you're curious to see what happens when family secrets come to light, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what I discovered in that envelope, or how it completely destroyed the image my brother had built of himself. Because what I found the next day, when I finally broke the seal that had been waiting for 7 years to be opened, would change everything I thought I knew about my family, and give me the power to bring James's world crashing down around him. The next evening, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple black dress I'd chosen for dinner. It was elegant, but understated, exactly the kind of outfit James would probably find some way to criticize. As I fastened Grandma Rose's antique silver bracelet around my wrist, I could almost hear her voice. Sometimes, Madison, the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth at exactly the right moment. The envelope sat unopened on my dresser. Its cream-colored surface yellowed slightly with age. I'd been staring at it all day, building up the courage to break the seal. Something told me that once I read whatever was inside, there would be no going back. The restaurant James had chosen was Alinea, one of Chicago's most expensive establishments. Of course. He'd probably picked it specifically to make some point about his sophisticated palate and unlimited budget. I'd looked up the menu online. The tasting menu was $395 per person, not including wine pairings. A deliberate choice designed to make his poor little sister feel out of place. I arrived at exactly 8 p.m. to find James already seated at a prime table, checking his Rolex, another recent acquisition he'd made sure to mention in our last conversation. He looked up as I approached, and I caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes as he took in my appearance. "Madison," he said, standing to give me a brief hug that felt more like a performance for the other diners. "You look nice. I wasn't sure you'd be able to make it to a place like this." "I managed to get by, James," I replied evenly, taking my seat. The waiter appeared immediately. Clearly, James had already established himself as the kind of customer who warranted extra attention. "The wine list, sir," the waiter said, presenting a leather-bound folder that was probably worth more than my monthly rent. "We'll have the Chateau Margaux 2010, James said without consulting me. "The whole bottle." He looked at me with a smug smile. "I hope you don't mind. I know it's a bit expensive, but I thought we should celebrate." "Celebrate what?" I asked, though I already knew he was setting up another opportunity to flaunt his wealth. "Well, Pierce Technologies just closed our biggest deal yet. $150 million contract with the Department of Defense. We're officially in the big leagues now. He leaned back in his chair, clearly expecting me to be impressed. This deal alone will probably add another $20 million to my personal net worth. The waiter poured the wine. I could smell the expensive vintage even before it reached my glass. James made a show of tasting it, nodding approvingly like he was some kind of sommelier rather than a kid from the South Side who'd learned about wine from YouTube videos. "That's wonderful, James," I said, taking a small sip. It was delicious, I had to admit, though I'd have been just as happy with a $20 bottle from Trader Joe's. "I'm sure Mom will be thrilled to hear about your success." "Speaking of Mom," James said, settling into what I recognized as his storytelling posture, "I've been thinking about getting her a little place in Florida. You know, somewhere she can really enjoy retirement without worrying about Chicago winters." He paused dramatically. "I'm looking at a condo community in Naples. About 800,000. Nothing too flashy, but oceanfront with all the amenities." I set down my wine glass, feeling the familiar sting of his calculated generosity. Every gift, every gesture, was designed to highlight the vast difference in our financial situations. "That's very generous of you." "Well, family is everything, right?" He smiled, but there was something cold in his eyes. "I mean, I know you help out when you can, but let's face it, your social worker salary probably doesn't leave much room for grand gestures." The first course arrived, some kind of foam that probably took 4 hours to prepare and would disappear in 2 bites. I watched James photograph it for his Instagram, complete with a caption about enjoying the finer things in life with family. "James," I said quietly, "do you remember when we used to go to Portillo's after Mom's night shifts? You'd save your allowance for weeks just to buy me a chocolate cake shake." He looked up from his phone, a flicker of something, maybe nostalgia, maybe annoyance, crossing his face. "That was different, Madison. We were kids. We didn't know any better." "Didn't know any better than what?" "Then to settle," he said, gesturing around the elegant dining room. "Look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with your choices, but some of us were meant for bigger things. Some of us were willing to sacrifice everything to achieve excellence." The word sacrifice hit me wrong. "What exactly did you sacrifice, James? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you sacrificed your decency, your humility, and your connection to the people who actually love you." His face darkened, and for a moment I saw a flash of the old James, the one who used to get angry when kids picked on me at school. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cool arrogance that had become his default expression. "You know what your problem is, Madison? You're bitter. You're angry that I made something of myself while you're still living in that tiny apartment, driving that piece of junk car, working with society's rejects for $35,000 a year." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You want to drag me down because seeing my success makes you feel like the failure you are." The words hit like a physical blow, but I'd been preparing for this moment all day. I thought about the envelope waiting at home, about Grandma Rose's final gift, about the secrets that were about to reshape everything we thought we knew about our family. "You're right about one thing, James," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "I am angry, but not because of your success. I'm angry because you've forgotten where you came from. You've forgotten who helped you get here. And most of all, you've forgotten who you really are." "I know exactly who I am," he snapped. "I'm James Pierce, CEO of Pierce Technologies, worth $50 million and climbing. I'm the guy who's going to take care of this family whether you appreciate it or not." "James Pierce," I repeated slowly. "That's interesting, because I've been wondering lately about that name. About our father. About the stories Mom told us growing up." Something shifted in his expression, just for a second, but I caught it. Fear, maybe? Or recognition? "What are you talking about?" I picked up my wine glass, taking another sip of the expensive vintage that he'd ordered to impress me. "Do you remember much about Dad? I was only 3 when he died, but you were 10. You must have some memories." "Of course I do," he said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Why are you bringing this up now?" "Just curious. It's funny how little we actually know about him, considering how much Mom used to talk about what a wonderful man he was. Don't you think it's strange that we don't have more photos? More stories, more evidence of his existence?" James was staring at me now, his arrogance replaced by something else. Suspicion. Worry. "Madison, what the hell is this about?" I smiled, feeling a sense of power I hadn't experienced in years. For once, I was the one with information he didn't have. For once, I was the one in control of the conversation. It's about family, James. It's about truth. And it's about the fact that Grandma Rose left me something before she died. Something she specifically wanted me to have when I turned 30. Something I think is going to change everything you believe about yourself and this family. He set down his fork, his appetite apparently gone. What kind of something? The kind of something that explains why you've always been Mom's golden boy. Why she's always treated you differently than me. Why she's always been so protective of certain family stories. I leaned forward, matching his earlier whisper. The kind of something that might explain where your real talents came from, and why you've always felt like you didn't quite belong with the rest of us. The color was draining from his face now, and I could see his mind racing, trying to process what I was implying. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. You know what, James? I've lost my appetite. But don't worry about the check. I'm sure you can afford it. After all, you're worth $50 million, right? I started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and James? You might want to call Mom tonight. Ask her about the envelope. Ask her about the secrets she's been keeping for 30 years. Ask her about who your real father is. His mouth fell open, but no words came out. For the first time in years, James Pierce, the arrogant multi-millionaire who had everything figured out, looked like the confused little boy I remembered from our childhood. I left him sitting there in that expensive restaurant, probably for the first time in his adult life, completely at a loss for words. The power dynamic between us had shifted so dramatically that I almost felt dizzy walking out into the cool Chicago night. But this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, I would finally open that envelope and learn exactly what Grandma Rose had wanted me to know. And then, my dear brother was going to discover that all the money in the world couldn't protect him from the truth about who he really was. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's arrogance finally caught up with them? Where the truth became more powerful than wealth or status? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because tomorrow, when I reveal what was in that envelope, you're going to understand exactly why James Pierce's $50 million empire was built on lies, and why everything he thought he knew about himself was about to come crashing down. What I found in Grandma Rose's final gift would destroy not just my brother's pride, but his entire identity, and I was finally ready to watch it happen. I barely slept that night. The envelope sat on my nightstand like a loaded weapon, and every time I closed my eyes, I could see James's face when I'd mentioned our father. That flicker of fear, the way his confidence had crumbled in real time. At 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee, sitting at my small kitchen table with the cream-colored envelope in front of me. The morning sun streamed through my apartment windows, illuminating the careful script of my name written in Grandma Rose's familiar handwriting. My phone had been buzzing all night. 13 missed calls from James, 4 from Mom, and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. Madison, what the hell was that about tonight? Call me now, we need to talk. This isn't funny. Whatever game you're playing, stop it. But the most telling message had come at 3 a.m. I called Mom. She won't tell me anything. She just started crying and said she needs to talk to you first. What did Grandma Rose tell you? So Mom knew. Whatever was in this envelope, she'd been keeping the secret for decades, probably dreading the day it would finally come to light. I took a deep breath and carefully broke the wax seal that had been waiting 7 years to be opened. Inside was a handwritten letter in Grandma Rose's precise script, along with what looked like legal documents and several old photographs. My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, it means you've reached your 30th birthday and hopefully gained the wisdom to handle what I'm about to tell you. I pray I've chosen the right person to carry this burden, but something in your character tells me you'll know what to do with the truth when the time comes. Your brother James is not your father's son. I had to read that sentence 3 times before its meaning fully sank in. James wasn't my half-brother. He was my half-brother, but not in the way I'd always believed. The letter continued. When your mother was 19, she had a brief affair with a married man, Charles Whitmore, a prominent Chicago businessman. She was young, naive, and working as a waitress at a restaurant where he often held business dinners. The affair lasted only 3 months, but it resulted in James. Charles was already married to a socialite from one of Chicago's oldest families. He had political ambitions and couldn't afford a scandal. When Sarah told him about the pregnancy, he panicked. He offered her money to handle the situation, and when she refused, he threatened to destroy her reputation and ensure she never worked in Chicago again. Charles Whitmore? The name sent a chill through me. I knew that name. Everyone in Chicago did. Whitmore Industries, one of the city's largest construction companies. Whitmore Foundation, which funded half the cultural institutions in the city. The Whitmore family, whose name appeared on buildings, hospital wings, and society pages. And if James was Charles Whitmore's son? I continued reading. Your mother was terrified and alone. She had no family support. Her parents had disowned her when she refused to get married to some boy from the neighborhood at 18. She was facing single motherhood with no resources and no protection against a powerful man who saw her as a threat. That's when she met David Pierce, your real father. David was a construction worker, kind-hearted but simple. He was completely smitten with Sarah despite her being pregnant with another man's child. He offered to marry her and raise the baby as his own. Sarah was desperate and grateful, so she accepted. For the first few years, David truly was a wonderful father to James. But as the boy grew older, it became harder to pretend. James was clearly gifted, intellectually advanced, ambitious, driven in ways that neither Sarah nor David could understand. He looked nothing like David, and his personality was so different from both his parents that people began to comment. More damaging was Charles Whitmore's presence in their lives. He couldn't completely stay away. His guilt and perhaps some paternal instinct made him want to ensure James was provided for. He arranged for David to get better construction jobs, made sure the family had decent housing, even set up a college fund for James without Sarah's knowledge. But David began to suspect. He started asking questions, becoming jealous and resentful. The marriage deteriorated quickly. When you were 3, David confronted Sarah about James's real parentage during a particularly ugly fight. In his anger and hurt, he threatened to expose everything, to tell James the truth, to contact Charles Whitmore, to destroy the life Sarah had built on lies. He stormed out of the house that night drunk and furious. The construction accident that killed him wasn't entirely accidental, Madison. David was working on a Whitmore Industries site. He was intoxicated, emotional, and careless. Whether he fell from that scaffolding by accident or on purpose, we'll never know. But I've always suspected he couldn't live with the truth anymore. I had to stop reading. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the letter. David Pierce, my father, my real father, had died knowing that the son he'd raised wasn't his, and that the man whose child he'd been raising had the power to give that child everything he could never provide. The photographs in the envelope told the rest of the story. There was a young Charles Whitmore at what looked like a business dinner, and even across decades, the resemblance to James was unmistakable. The same angular jaw, the same piercing eyes, the same confident posture that had nothing to do with upbringing and everything to do with genetics. There were also legal documents, DNA test results that Grandma Rose had somehow obtained, financial records showing mysterious payments to our family over the years, and most damaging of all, correspondence between Charles Whitmore and a private investigator he'd hired to keep tabs on James's progress through school and into his career. Charles Whitmore hadn't just abandoned his son, he'd been secretly orchestrating James's success from the shadows. The full scholarship to Northwestern that James thought he'd earned through merit? Arranged by his biological father. The venture capital that had funded his first startup? From investors connected to Whitmore Industries. Even some of the early contracts that had established Pierce Technologies had come through Whitmore's influence. James's entire empire, everything he'd built his arrogance on, had been handed to him by a father he didn't even know he had. The final page of the letter was the most devastating. Charles Whitmore is now 73 years old, still married to the same woman, still one of Chicago's most respected businessmen. He has 2 legitimate children who stand to inherit his fortune, an empire worth over $2 billion. But here's what James doesn't know. Charles has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He has perhaps 6 months to live. He's been wrestling with whether to acknowledge James before he dies, whether to include him in his will, whether to finally tell the truth about their relationship. I believe he's been waiting for the right moment, the right catalyst. And I believe, Madison, that you are meant to be that catalyst. This is not about revenge, though I know James has hurt you with his arrogance. This is about truth, about family, and about ensuring that Charles Whitmore faces the consequences of his choices before it's too late. The decision is yours, my dear. You can keep these secrets buried, or you can use them to force both men to confront the lies they've been living with for 30 years. But remember this, the truth has power only if you're brave enough to wield it. All my love, Grandma Rose. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after finishing the letter, watching the sun climb higher through my windows, processing the magnitude of what I just learned. James, my arrogant, condescending brother who'd spent years making me feel inferior, was the secret heir to a $2 billion fortune. But he was also the product of a lie that had destroyed my real father and haunted my mother for 30 years. Charles Whitmore, one of Chicago's most powerful men, was dying while wrestling with a secret that could destroy his reputation and devastate his legitimate family. And my mother had been carrying this burden alone for 3 decades, watching her biological son succeed while never being able to tell him the truth about why success seemed to come so easily to him. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was James, probably calling for the 20th time since last night. This time I answered. "Madison?" he said immediately, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and panic. "Please, just tell me what's going on. What did Grandma Rose leave you? What did she know about our family?" I looked at the photographs spread across my kitchen table, images of a father he'd never known, documents that proved his entire life had been orchestrated by forces beyond his control, evidence that would shatter everything he believed about himself. "Meet me at Lincoln Park in an hour," I said quietly. "By the pond where we used to feed the ducks when we were kids. And James? Bring Mom. It's time all 3 of us finally knew the truth." "Madison, you're scaring me," he said. And for the first time in years, he sounded like the vulnerable big brother I remembered from childhood. "I know," I replied. "But some truths are worth being scared of." After I hung up, I carefully gathered all the documents and photographs, placing them back in the envelope that had waited 7 years to deliver its devastating message. In 1 hour, I would destroy my brother's world and force my mother to face the consequences of choices she'd made when she was barely older than I am now. I would reveal that James Pierce, the self-made multimillionaire, was actually the secret son of one of America's wealthiest families. But more than that, I would finally understand why I'd always felt like an outsider in my own family. Because I was the daughter of a man who died protecting a secret that wasn't even his to keep. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything you thought you knew about your life? Have you ever had to decide whether to reveal a truth that would hurt the people you love? Share your thoughts in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone in carrying the weight of revelations like this. Subscribe to this channel if you want to know what happened when I finally told James the truth about his biological father, and how a dying billionaire's secret changed all of our lives forever. Because what happened next in that park, when my brother learned that his entire identity was built on a lie, would test the bonds of our family in ways none of us were prepared for. The truth was about to set us all free, but first it was going to destroy everything we thought we knew about ourselves.